Between 1839 and 1856, in the shadow of Charleston's grand mansions, something happened that even the most hardened dockworkers refused to speak about in daylight. 3 brothers, a locked attic, and 2 children whose pale skin made them valuable in ways that defy human decency. What started as a peculiar auction in the spring of 1839 would spiral into 17 years of horror so profound that when Union soldiers finally discovered the truth in 1862, the commanding officer would write in his private diary, "I have witnessed battlefields strewn with dead. I have seen them inside of slave ships, but nothing prepared me for what those brothers did to innocence itself." Before we continue with what really happened in that Charleston attic, and why 2 albino children became the obsession of the Prescott brothers, make sure to subscribe to Liturgy of Fear and hit that notification bell so you never miss our investigations into history's darkest corners. And please, comment below telling us what state or city you're listening from. We love knowing where our community of truth seekers is located. The question that will haunt you for the next 30 minutes is simple. What makes a human being look at a child and see only profit, only possession, only something to be displayed like an object behind glass? Charleston, South Carolina, April 1839. The morning arrives heavy with humidity, the kind that makes clothes stick to skin and turns the air itself into something you have to push through. Down at the waterfront auction house on Vendue Range, a crowd is gathering larger than usual for a Tuesday morning. Word has spread through the city's elite circles about something extraordinary being offered for sale today. Something rare. Something that wealthy collectors have been seeking for years. Inside the auction house, the auctioneer, a man named Silas Blackwood, prepares for what he knows will be the most unusual sale of his 30-year career. He's sold thousands of enslaved people in this room. Families torn apart, children separated from mothers, human beings reduced to inventory and price tags. But today's lot is different in a way that makes even Blackwood, a man who has long ago numbed himself to the horror of his profession, feel a creeping unease. In a small preparation room behind the auction floor, 2 children sit on a wooden bench, holding hands. They are twins, a boy and a girl, 7 years old. Their names are Ezra and Eliza Montgomery, though the auction documents will list them simply as Lot 47. Matched pair, unusual coloring, suitable for display purposes. What makes them unusual? What has drawn this crowd of Charleston's wealthiest residents? Is their complete albinism. Their skin is the color of fresh milk, almost translucent in certain light. Their hair is pure white, fine as spider silk, falling past their shoulders. Their eyes are the palest blue, almost colorless, with a quality that makes them seem to look through people rather than at them. In an era obsessed with curiosities, with displaying the unusual and exotic in private collections and traveling shows, albino children are considered the rarest of acquisitions, especially twins, especially ones this young, still trainable, still moldable into whatever their owners desire them to become. Eliza grips her brother's hand tighter as they hear the crowd noise growing beyond the door. She's wearing a simple white dress that someone put on her this morning, making her look even more ghostly. Ezra wears white pants and a white shirt, his small frame seeming to disappear into the fabric. They don't fully understand what's happening. They only know that 3 weeks ago, they were living with their mother in a small cabin on a rice plantation 20 miles outside Charleston. Their mother, Rebecca, was enslaved there, had been her whole life. When the twins were born with their startling appearance, the plantation owner saw opportunity. For 7 years, he kept them somewhat hidden, showing them only to select visitors, building reputation and anticipation. Then he died suddenly, and his estate was liquidated. Everything sold, including Rebecca and her unusual children. The twins were separated from their mother 5 days ago. Rebecca fought, screamed, begged, but enslaved mothers have no rights over their children. The last thing Eliza remembers is her mother's face pressed against a wagon wheel as they were driven away. Her mother's voice breaking as she cried their names over and over, until distance swallowed the sound. Now they sit in this room, waiting for something they cannot comprehend, sensing only that their lives are about to change in terrible ways. The door opens. Silas Blackwood enters, looks at them with an expression that might be pity, or might just be assessment of merchandise. He gestures for them to stand. "Come along," he says, not unkindly, but with the professional distance of a man who cannot afford emotional attachment to inventory. It's time. The auction floor is packed. Charleston's elite have turned out in numbers that surprise even Blackwood. He recognizes shipping magnates, plantation owners, physicians, even a few prominent women, wealthy widows who collect curiosities for their private galleries. Near the front, three brothers stand together, and Blackwood notes them particularly because of their intensity. The Prescott brothers, Edmund, Theodore, and Nathaniel, ranging in age from 32 to 26. They own a modest shipping business, not wealthy by Charleston standards, but comfortable enough. What makes them notable today is the way they're looking toward the preparation room door, with an expression Blackwood has seen before on the faces of collectors, who have decided they must possess something regardless of cost. Blackwood takes his position on the raised platform. "Gentlemen and ladies," he begins, his voice carrying the practiced rhythm of a man who has done this thousands of times. "We come now to lot 47, which many of you have traveled specifically to witness today. I present to you a matched pair of the rarest quality, children of approximately 7 years age, both in excellent health, and possessing the extraordinary characteristic of complete albinism." He pauses for effect as an assistant brings Ezra and Eliza onto the platform. The crowd reaction is immediate. Gasps, murmurs, people pressing forward to see better. Under the harsh light of the auction house windows, the twins seem almost supernatural, their pale skin glowing, their white hair catching the sunlight, their strange colorless eyes wide with fear. "Beautiful," someone whispers, "like porcelain dolls." The phrase catches, ripples through the crowd. Porcelain dolls, living porcelain dolls. Blackwood continues his pitch. "As you can see, these children are absolutely extraordinary, suitable for display in the finest private collections. They are docile, well-behaved, and have been kept in good condition. The girl is particularly delicate in appearance. The boy shows promise for training in various domestic roles. Both are literate to a basic degree and speak clearly. He's making them sound like show animals, like exotic pets, and the crowd responds accordingly. Hands raise as the bidding begins. "We'll start at $500 for the pair." "500" comes a voice from the middle. 600, 700. The numbers climb quickly. Blackwood keeps his rhythm, acknowledging each bid with practiced efficiency. On the platform, Ezra and Eliza stand frozen, overwhelmed by the attention, by the strange hunger in the eyes looking at them, by the growing certainty that something bad is about to happen, and there is absolutely nothing they can do to stop it. $800, 900, 1,000. The bidding slows as the price climbs beyond what most consider reasonable for two children, regardless of their unusual appearance. Several bidders drop out, leaving three serious competitors. A wealthy widow named Mrs. Harriet Beaumont, known for her collection of curiosities displayed in her River Street mansion. A physician named Dr. Marcus Whitfield, who wants them for what he calls medical study and public exhibition. And the Prescott brothers, who bid as a unit, conferring quietly before each raise. 1,100 Mrs. Beaumont calls. 1,200 Dr. Whitfield responds. 1,300 Edmund Prescott says, his voice steady, but with an edge that makes Blackwood glance at him more carefully. The bidding continues. $1,500, $1,600, $1,700. At $1,800, Mrs. Beaumont shakes her head and steps back. At $2,000, Dr. Whitfield hesitates, then reluctantly withdraws. The price has climbed to nearly 4 times what healthy adult enslaved workers typically sell for. It's an extraordinary sum for 2 children, a sum that reflects not their labor value, but their value as objects of fascination. Blackwood looks toward the Prescott brothers. $2,000 is the bid. Do I hear 2,100? Silence. The crowd waits. $2,000 going once, going twice. Sold to the gentleman from Prescott, shipping for $2,000. The gavel comes down with a sound like a gunshot. On the platform, Eliza begins to cry silently, tears running down her pale cheeks. Ezra puts his arm around his sister, trying to be brave, trying to protect her even though he's just as terrified and just as helpless. The Prescott brothers move forward to complete the transaction. Edmund, the eldest, handles the financial arrangements with Blackwood, while his brothers Theodore and Nathaniel approach the platform. Theodore reaches out and tilts Eliza's face up to examine her in the light. "Remarkable," he murmurs, "even better than described." Nathaniel circles Ezra, studying him from different angles like one might evaluate a horse or a painting. The boy has good bone structure. They'll photograph beautifully. The casual way they discuss the children, the clinical assessment of their features, the complete absence of recognition that these are terrified 7-year-olds being sold away from their mother. All of it reveals something essential about the Prescott brothers. They do not see Ezra and Eliza as children. They see investment, opportunity, objects to be acquired and utilized for profit. Within an hour, the transaction is complete. The twins are loaded into a covered wagon along with paperwork certifying the Prescott brothers' ownership. As the wagon pulls away from Vendue Range, Eliza looks back toward the auction house, as if somehow their mother might appear, might rescue them, might make this nightmare end. But the street behind them remains empty, except for the usual traffic of Charleston commerce. People buying and selling goods, conducting business, living their lives completely unconcerned with 2 children whose existence has just been fundamentally transformed. The Prescott brothers live in a 3-story townhouse on Trad Street, in a respectable, if not elite, neighborhood of Charleston. The house is narrow but deep, typical of Charleston architecture, with high ceilings and large windows designed to catch any breeze in the suffocating summer heat. When the wagon arrives, the brothers bring the twins in through the rear entrance, avoiding the front door and any curious neighbors who might see. Inside, the house is modestly furnished, but with certain unusual features. The parlor contains what appears to be a small stage area with velvet curtains and professional lighting equipment. One wall is covered with daguerreotype photographs, all of unusual subjects. A man with severely deformed features, a woman with extensive tattoos, children with various physical abnormalities. A pattern begins to emerge. The Prescott brothers are collectors, but not of paintings or sculptures. They collect human curiosities, documenting them through the still new art of photography, and apparently displaying them for paying audiences. Theodore Prescott, the middle brother, seems to be the leader in this enterprise. He guides the twins upstairs, his hand firm on their shoulders, his voice maintaining a tone of false friendliness that makes the children's skin crawl. "You're going to live in the attic," he explains as they climb the narrow stairs. "We've prepared a special room just for you. You'll have everything you need. Food, clothes, a comfortable place to sleep. All we ask in return is your cooperation." He says cooperation like it's a choice, but the way he grips their shoulders suggests otherwise. The attic has been converted into living quarters, but calling it a room doesn't capture the reality. It's more like a cage designed to look like a room. The space is perhaps 20 feet by 15, with a sloped ceiling that makes the far end too low to stand in. There are 2 small beds, a washstand, a chamber pot, and a trunk containing white clothing, all white, dresses for Eliza, shirts and pants for Ezra, everything designed to emphasize their pale coloring. But the most disturbing feature is the door. Heavy oak, with 3 separate locks on the outside and none on the inside. And the window, the single small window that might provide light and air, has been fitted with bars so closely spaced that even a child's hand couldn't fit through. "This is your home now," Theodore says, ushering them inside. "If you behave, if you do exactly what we ask, you'll be treated well. If you cause problems, well, let's not discuss unpleasant possibilities. I'm sure you're both intelligent enough to understand the situation." He leaves, and the sound of locks clicking into place is somehow worse than anything he said. The twins stand in the middle of their new prison, holding hands, trying to process what has happened to them. 7 years old, torn from their mother, sold to strangers, locked in an attic in a city they don't know. That first night, they cry themselves to sleep, clutching each other on one of the small beds, their white hair tangled together, their pale faces pressed close as if proximity might provide some protection against what is coming. They don't know yet what the Prescott brothers have planned for them. They don't know about the exhibitions, about the photographs, about the ways they will be displayed and used over the next 17 years. They only know that the world has revealed itself as a place of profound cruelty, and they are utterly powerless within it. The next morning begins their new routine. Edmund Prescott, the eldest brother, comes to the attic room carrying a breakfast tray. Bread, butter, milk, simple food, but adequate. He sets it down and watches as the children eat, studying them with an intensity that makes them uncomfortable. When they finish, he produces a measuring tape and a notebook. "Stand up," he instructs, Ezra first. He measures the boy's height, arm length, head circumference, writing everything down with meticulous care. Then Eliza, the same process. He notes the exact shade of their hair, the unusual color of their eyes, the translucent quality of their skin. He treats it like a scientific examination, clinical and detached, never acknowledging their fear or discomfort. "This will happen every month," he explains. "I need to document your growth and development. You are valuable assets, and we must maintain detailed records. Assets. Not children, not people, but assets, things owned, things valued only for what they can provide to their owners." After the measurements, Theodore arrives with an armload of costumes. The brothers have prepared an entire wardrobe, outfits designed to emphasize and exoticize the twins' appearance. White silk dresses for Eliza that make her look like a ghost or an angel. White suits for Ezra that make him look like a miniature gentleman from some fairy tale. Matching outfits that emphasize their twinness, their symmetry, their matching strangeness. "Today you'll have your first photograph session," Theodore announces with enthusiasm that makes it clear he views this as an exciting opportunity, rather than a violation of 2 frightened children. "We've set up the equipment in the parlor. All you need to do is stand where we tell you, hold the pose, and stay very still." It sounds simple, but photographic exposure in 1839 requires absolute stillness for several minutes. Any movement blurs the image, ruins the shot, wastes expensive materials. The twins are dressed in matching white outfits and brought downstairs to the parlor where Nathaniel, the youngest Prescott brother, has set up the daguerreotype camera equipment. Process is complex, requiring chemical preparation of metal plates, precise timing, and complete immobility from the subjects. "Stand here," Nathaniel directs, positioning the twins on the small stage. "Eliza on the left, Ezra on the right. Hold hands, good. Now look directly at the camera, don't smile. We want you to look serene, otherworldly." He adjusts their positions, tilts their heads, arranges their hair, treating them like mannequins. When he's satisfied with the composition, he prepares the plate and removes the lens cap. Now don't move. Don't even blink if you can help it. Stay absolutely still for 3 minutes. 3 minutes doesn't sound long until you have to hold completely still, frozen in position, muscles cramping, 7 years old and terrified, but not allowed to show it. Eliza feels tears forming, but blinks them back, knowing that crying would ruin the photograph and probably result in punishment. Ezra focuses on breathing slowly, on being strong for his sister, on enduring this the way they will have to endure everything now. Finally, Nathaniel replaces the lens cap. Good, that was acceptable. We'll need several more though, different poses, different arrangements. This is just the beginning. Over the next 6 hours, the twins are photographed in multiple configurations, standing together, sitting separately, posed with props, white flowers, white doves, anything that emphasizes their pale coloring, dressed and redressed in different costumes. By the end, they're exhausted, their muscles aching from holding poses, their eyes burning from the bright lights, their spirits crushed by the relentless objectification. When they are finally returned to the attic room, they collapse onto the beds and fall asleep immediately, too tired even to cry. This becomes the pattern of their existence. Days filled with photograph sessions, with measurements and documentation, with being dressed up and posed and treated as living dolls rather than children. But the worst part, the part that will haunt them for the rest of their lives, begins 3 months after their arrival, when the Prescott brothers hold their first private exhibition. The parlor has been transformed into a viewing theater. Velvet curtains frame the small stage, professional lighting illuminates the space, chairs have been arranged for an audience, and that audience, 20 invited guests, Charleston's wealthy and curious, has paid $5 each for the privilege of viewing the famous Albino twins. The twins are dressed in matching white silk outfits, their hair carefully arranged, their skin powdered to emphasize its translucence. They're instructed to stand on the stage while Theodore Prescott provides narration. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you one of nature's rarest phenomena. Twin children of perfect albinism, their genetic condition rendering them unique specimens for study and appreciation. Note the complete absence of pigmentation in skin and hair. Note the unusual eye coloration. Note the symmetry of their features, made even more striking by their matching appearance. He talks about them like they're not there, like they can't hear themselves being discussed as phenomena and specimens. The audience leans forward, studying the children with fascinated intensity. Some take notes, some sketch their features, all treat it as an educational and entertaining experience, never considering the psychological impact on 2 8-year-old children being displayed like zoo animals. After the narration, the audience is invited to ask questions. Are they truly twins or just similar looking? Yes, confirmed biological twins. Can we see them in different lighting? Of course, we have various illumination options. Do they speak? Yes, but we generally prefer they remain silent during viewings to maintain the aesthetic effect. The twins stand frozen through all of this, trained by now to show no emotion, to remain still and silent, to be what the Prescott brothers require them to be. But inside, something is breaking. Some fundamental sense of self, some belief that they are human beings with dignity and rights, is crumbling under the weight of being repeatedly treated as objects for others' entertainment. The exhibitions become regular events, monthly at first, then twice monthly as the Prescott brothers build their reputation for having the finest display of human curiosities in Charleston. The twins perform, that's what it becomes, a performance, on that parlor stage over and over, sometimes for small private groups, occasionally for larger audiences of 30 or 40 people. Between exhibitions, they remain locked in the attic except for photography sessions, and the rare occasions when they're allowed brief exercise in the walled courtyard behind the house, always under supervision, always prevented from any contact with the outside world. They live in almost complete isolation from other children, from normal childhood experiences, from anything that might remind them they are supposed to be children rather than curiosities. Eliza develops severe anxiety, crying herself to sleep most nights, flinching whenever the door locks rattle. Ezra becomes withdrawn, speaking less and less, retreating into himself as a form of psychological protection. Both begin to exhibit signs of what we would now recognize as complex trauma, but in 1840, their distress is simply noted as nervousness that needs to be controlled. The years accumulate. 1839 becomes 1840, becomes 1841. The twins grow older, but their lives remain static, locked in that attic, brought out only to be photographed or displayed. Denied education beyond basic reading and writing. Denied social contact. Denied everything that makes childhood bearable. The Prescott brothers' business flourishes. The photographs of the twins become highly sought after, selling for premium prices to collectors throughout the United States and Europe. The exhibitions generate significant income. The twins, purchased for $2,000, prove to be extraordinarily profitable investments. By 1845, when the twins are 13 years old, their situation begins to shift in new and disturbing ways. Adolescence brings physical changes, and those changes complicate the Prescott brothers' business model. The twins are no longer cute children who can be easily posed and dressed up. They're becoming young adults, and that transformation creates new dynamics that the brothers must navigate. Theodore Prescott, now 38 years old, and increasingly the dominant figure among the three brothers, begins to see different opportunities. The twins are growing into their features. Eliza is developing into a striking young woman despite the circumstances of her captivity. Ezra is becoming taller, his features more defined, his albinism giving him an almost ethereal appearance. The nature of the exhibitions begins to change. Instead of innocent displays of natural curiosity, they take on more problematic undertones. The audience is still told they're viewing scientific specimens, but the costumes become more elaborate, more theatrical, sometimes more revealing. The twins are posed in increasingly uncomfortable scenarios, tableaux that blur the line between educational display and something darker. Eliza is dressed as a fairy, as an angel, as mythological creatures, outfits that emphasize her developing figure. Ezra is posed as a prince, as a spirit, as otherworldly beings, presentations that objectify him in new ways. Both twins understand what's happening, even if they lack language to articulate it. They're being sexualized, their bodies commodified not just as curiosities, but as objects of a different kind of fascination. The audiences change too. More men attending without their wives, more lingering looks, more uncomfortable attention that makes the twins feel exposed in ways that go beyond being displayed. During one exhibition in late 1845, a wealthy planter named Robert Carstairs approaches Theodore after the show. "I'd like to purchase the girl," he says bluntly. "Name your price." "She's not for sale," Theodore responds, but his tone suggests he's calculating possibilities. "Not even for $5,000, Carstairs presses. The Prescott brothers confer privately. $5,000 is an extraordinary sum, enough to change their financial situation significantly. But Eliza has become central to their exhibition business. Selling her would eliminate half of the main attraction. They decline, but the offer reveals something alarming. The twins are now valuable not just as curiosities to display, but as property that could be sold into situations that might be even worse than their current captivity. This knowledge adds new layers of fear to their already terrified existence. In the attic that night, Eliza breaks down completely. "They're going to sell me," she whispers to her brother. "Did you hear what that man offered? They're going to separate us." Ezra, now 13 and trying to be brave despite his own terror, holds his sister close. "I won't let them separate us. I'll find a way to protect you." But even as he says it, they both know the truth. They have no power to prevent anything. They are property, completely under the control of men who view them as assets to be managed and exploited. The following weeks are marked by increased tension. The Prescott brothers argue among themselves about future plans for the twins. Edmund wants to maintain the current exhibition model. Theodore wants to expand, to take the twins on tour to other cities, to maximize their earning potential while they're still young enough to be marketable. Nathaniel, always the quietest brother, seems increasingly uncomfortable with the whole enterprise, but lacks the courage or conviction to oppose his brothers. The twins overhear fragments of these arguments through the attic floor. They learn they're being discussed like investments, their futures debated in purely financial terms, their humanity completely absent from the calculations. In December 1845, Theodore wins the argument. The brothers will take the twins on tour, starting with a circuit of major southern cities: Savannah, Richmond, Atlanta, New Orleans. They'll rent venues, advertise heavily, charge higher admission prices, and maximize revenue from their valuable assets. The news fills the twins with new dread. Their captivity, at least, has been in one location. Now they'll be transported, displayed to even more strangers, denied even the small comfort of familiar surroundings. But they have no choice. They never have a choice. On a cold January morning in 1846, they're loaded into a covered wagon along with the Prescott brothers' equipment, and the tour begins. Over the next 18 months, they travel throughout the South, displayed in rented halls and private venues, photographed in different cities, exhibited to thousands of paying customers. The travel is exhausting. The twins spend most of their time in locked hotel rooms or in the covered wagon, brought out only for exhibitions, never allowed to simply walk through a city or experience normal activities. In Savannah, they perform nightly for 2 weeks in a theater, presented as the amazing Albino twins, nature's most perfect curiosities. The newspaper advertisements describe them in terms that make them sound like circus attractions rather than human beings. In Richmond, they're photographed by multiple professional studios, the images distributed widely, making their faces recognizable throughout the South. In Atlanta, an exhibition draws over 300 people over 3 days, cramming into a concert hall to see the famous twins. In New Orleans, they're displayed at an exposition alongside other human curiosities: a man without arms who paints with his feet, a woman of extremely short stature dressed as a child, a man covered in thick hair presented as the wild man of Borneo. The twins are just one part of a larger spectacle of human exploitation, all of it legal, all of it socially acceptable. All of it enabled by the institution of slavery that reduces certain people to property. The tour is financially successful. The Prescott brothers return to Charleston in mid-1847 with significantly more money and enhanced reputation. They've proven that the twins can generate substantial revenue, that the market for human curiosity exhibitions is robust and expanding. But the cost to Ezra and Eliza is profound. They're now 15 years old, have spent 8 years in captivity, have been displayed to thousands of strangers, have been photographed and examined and objectified so repeatedly that they've begun to lose any sense of themselves as individuals rather than as the spectacle others see. Eliza has developed a habit of dissociation during exhibitions, mentally removing herself from her body, existing elsewhere in her mind while her physical form stands on stage being stared at. Ezra has stopped speaking almost entirely except when directly required to do so, retreating into silence as his only form of resistance. Both show signs of severe psychological trauma, but mental health is not something the Prescott brothers concern themselves with. As long as the twins can perform their role, can stand and be displayed, their internal suffering is irrelevant. Back in Charleston, the routine resumes. Locked in the attic between exhibitions, brought out for photographs and displays, denied any life beyond their function as curiosities. Years continue to pass. 1847, 1848, 1849, 1850. The twins grow into adults, their adolescence spent entirely in captivity, their early 20s marked by the same monotonous cycle of exploitation. By 1851, both are 19 years old, have spent 12 years with the Prescott brothers, and have begun to experience a dangerous emotion, not hope. Hope has long since died, but a kind of desperate rage. A furious understanding that their entire lives have been stolen, that they've been reduced to objects, that the men who own them see them as nothing but sources of revenue. This rage manifests differently in each twin. Eliza begins to refuse food, a form of resistance that terrifies her captors because it threatens their investment. When she loses too much weight, looks too gaunt, the exhibitions suffer. The audience wants to see beautiful curiosities, not evidence of suffering. Theodore Prescott responds with force feeding, a horrific process that leaves Eliza traumatized further, but achieves the goal of maintaining her weight. Ezra's resistance is more subtle. During exhibitions, he begins to make small mistakes, disrupting poses, breaking character in tiny ways that frustrate his captors, but are difficult to punish without damaging the product they're trying to sell. The Prescott brothers respond with increased control. The locks on the attic door are supplemented with chains. The twins' food is carefully monitored and measured. Any hint of resistance is met with deprivation. No meals, no candles at night, extended isolation. It's a battle of wills between captive and captor, and the captors have all the power. But the twins' resistance, however small and ultimately futile, represents something important. A refusal to completely surrender their humanity, a stubborn insistence that somewhere inside, beneath all the trauma and exploitation, they are still people rather than just curiosities. In the spring of 1856, something happens that changes everything. Charleston is experiencing tensions over the growing national debate about slavery. The city is divided between those who defend the institution as essential to Southern prosperity and those who, while perhaps not abolitionists, are beginning to question the more extreme practices of human bondage. Into this environment comes a journalist from Boston named Samuel Richardson, writing for a northern newspaper, visiting Charleston to document Southern society. He hears about the famous Albino twins at the Prescott house, purchases a ticket to an exhibition, and attends one evening in April. What he witnesses disturbs him profoundly. Not just the display itself, though that's troubling enough, but the visible distress of the twins, the mechanical way they move through their performance, the dead look in their eyes. He writes an article that is published in 3 northern newspapers, describing the exhibition in terms that make it sound less like educational entertainment and more like human trafficking. He doesn't use those exact words, the term doesn't exist yet, but his description of 2 clearly traumatized young adults being displayed for profit, while obviously in psychological distress, creates controversy. The article reaches Charleston through reprinting in a local paper that includes it as an example of Northern hypocrisy and interference in Southern affairs. But it also reaches the attention of a free black minister named Reverend James Morrison, who runs a small congregation that includes formerly enslaved people who purchased their freedom. Morrison reads the article and begins asking questions. Who are these twins? Where did they come from? Who was their mother? Through careful investigation over several months, he traces the twins back to the 1839 auction, discovers they were sold away from their mother, Rebecca Montgomery, and learns that Rebecca is still alive, still enslaved on the same plantation where the twins were born. Morrison undertakes a mission that is both brave and dangerous for a free black man in the 1850s South. He travels to the plantation, locates Rebecca, and tells her that her children are alive in Charleston. Rebecca is now 43 years old, has spent 17 years not knowing if her children lived or died, was told after their sale that she should forget them and focus on survival. Learning they're alive breaks something open in her, a dam of grief and rage that has been contained for nearly 2 decades. Is there anything that can be done? She asks Morrison. Can they be freed? Can I see them? Morrison is honest about the realities. The twins are legal property of the Prescott brothers. South Carolina law offers no pathway for challenging their enslavement. Any attempt to help them escape would be illegal and potentially fatal for everyone involved. But he promises to try something, anything. Back in Charleston, Morrison begins a careful campaign. He contacts anti-slavery activists in the North, sharing the twins' story, building support for some kind of intervention. He reaches out to sympathetic clergy in Charleston, few but present, trying to build local pressure on the Prescott brothers. He even attempts to meet with Theodore Prescott directly, requesting a private conversation. Theodore agrees to meet, curious about what this free black minister could possibly want. They meet in the parlor of the Prescott house, the same room where the twins are regularly displayed. Morrison chooses his words carefully, knowing that direct accusation will achieve nothing. Mr. Prescott, I have learned of the circumstances by which you acquired Ezra and Eliza Montgomery. I have located their mother, who was separated from them 17 years ago. I come to ask, purely as a humanitarian gesture, whether you might consider allowing a reunion. Even brief, even supervised. A mother has been separated from her children for 17 years. Surely some compassion is appropriate. Theodore's face hardens. The twins are my property, legally purchased. I have no obligation to facilitate contact with previous connections. Such contact would be disruptive to the business arrangement I have carefully built. Besides, the twins are well cared for. They have adequate food, shelter, and clothing. Many enslaved people live in far worse conditions. But they are not living, Reverend Morrison says quietly. They are being displayed like objects, denied any semblance of normal life, kept in isolation except when you profit from exhibiting them. This cannot be what God intends for his creations. Theodore stands, signaling the conversation is over. Reverend, I suggest you concern yourself with your own affairs. The twins are my property. How I choose to use my property is not your concern, nor is it subject to your moral judgment. Good day. Morrison leaves, knowing he's achieved nothing through direct appeal, but determined to find another approach. Over the following months, he corresponds with abolitionists in the North, trying to build a case that might generate enough publicity to pressure the Prescotts into at least moderating their treatment of the twins. But legal options are limited. The twins are enslaved property in a slave state. Northern law cannot touch them, and most Northerners, while perhaps sympathetic, have their own concerns and their own battles to fight over slavery. The nation is sliding toward crisis. The Compromise of 1850 temporarily eased tensions, but solved nothing fundamental. Bleeding Kansas shows that violence over slavery's expansion is inevitable. The Dred Scott decision in 1857 will make clear that federal law protects slavery even in free territories. In this larger context of national crisis, 2 albino twins locked in a Charleston attic are a tragic footnote. Their suffering real, but lost in the scale of millions suffering under slavery's weight. Morrison continues trying, but progress is impossible. The Prescott brothers maintain their grip on the twins, continue their exhibitions, continue profiting from human exploitation that is entirely legal and socially acceptable within their community. Then in 1859, something happens that shifts the landscape. John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry sends shockwaves through the South. The idea that Northern abolitionists might use violence to end slavery terrifies Southern whites, creates paranoia and crackdowns on anything that might be seen as supporting enslaved people's resistance. In this atmosphere, Reverend Morrison's efforts on behalf of the twins become dangerous. He receives warnings from sympathetic sources that he's being watched, that his correspondence with Northern activists has been noted.